I died. Not metaphorically, not in a dream. My heart simply stopped, my lungs collapsed, and the world blinked out. I expected silence, oblivion, but instead I woke up, somewhere else. No light, no sound, just me, suspended in stillness. Before me stood 7 doors. They were tall, weathered, impossibly ancient, yet somehow familiar, like they'd been waiting. A voice, not a voice, more like a knowing, rose within me. You want peace? Then face yourself. I didn't understand. I wasn't evil. I hadn't killed anyone. I paid my bills, smiled at neighbors, donated when I could. Sure, I was selfish sometimes. I'd wanted more than I needed. Got angry, envied, lied, loved wrong. That's just being human, right? That's what I told myself anyway. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe we all do. I didn't want to open those doors. I didn't want to see. But in death, there's no turning back. Each door holds a reflection of me. Not what I showed the world, but what I buried. What I justified. What I became. They won't scream. They won't punish. They'll whisper truths I spent a lifetime ignoring. And I'll have no choice but to listen. If you're hearing this, it means you're still alive. You still have time to choose differently. I didn't. I walked through the first door because I had nowhere else to go. My story isn't one of monsters or demons. It's about the darkness we carry quietly. The rot we name normal. And the price of never looking in the mirror. So listen closely. I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to warn you before the doors appear for you too. And then the first door appeared. Not with a scream, but with a whisper. A reflection in gold. A shadow in the shape of who I once believed I was. Waiting inside. Gate 1, the mirror. That lied. Pride, Lucifer. I stepped through the first door. It didn't creak. It didn't resist. It welcomed me, like it had missed me. Inside, there was no fire, no brimstone. Just a long corridor lined with mirrors. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. They didn't reflect the hallway behind me or the shape of my soul. They reflected me. But not the me I remembered. Each mirror showed a version of myself I had carefully constructed over the years. Some confident, some admired, some feared. Faces I'd worn like masks. Personas I built with pride. Titles, achievements, applause. All the things that made me feel important. But as I walked deeper, the mirrors began to shift. The smiles turned stiff. The eyes hollow. I saw the moments I had claimed credit for what wasn't mine. The people I had belittled just to feel taller. The silence I kept when someone else deserved the praise. I saw the need to be right, to be seen, to be special. I saw how I turned acts of kindness into performances. How I helped others, not out of compassion, but because I wanted to be seen as good. I saw the way I used humility as a disguise for vanity. You lied, I whispered. But it wasn't the mirrors that had lied. It was me. I built an image so carefully curated, even I believed it. I had weaponized my own light to blind others. And somewhere in that process, I forgot who I really was. There were mirrors showing past arguments, moments where I spoke over others, not because I had something meaningful to say, but because I wanted to win. I remembered the satisfaction I felt when someone else faltered, and I pretended to comfort them while secretly enjoying their fall. Pride isn't loud. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just smirks. A voice called out, not from the dark, but from within a mirror near the end. It was calm, clear, familiar. You feared being small more than being false. I turned to that mirror. The version of me inside it was different. No pride, no posture, no shine. Just a boy, bare, vulnerable, honest, and afraid. Not afraid of the darkness, afraid of being ordinary. reached for the glass. It didn't shatter, it embraced me. And I felt a crack deep within. A breaking, not of bone, but of illusion. Pride had kept me afloat for so long I didn't know how to breathe without it. But now, stripped of it, I could finally inhale, finally see. I fell to my knees in the corridor, not in punishment, in mourning, for the time I wasted trying to be more than human instead of being simply real. Lucifer didn't appear with horns or wings. He didn't need to. The room itself was him. Every mirror, every lie, every whisper of, "You're better than them." Every silent nod when I looked down on someone struggling. Every little voice that said, "They don't deserve what you do." Pride is subtle like that. It flatters, it uplifts, it seduces, until you no longer know where the lie ends and you begin. But before I could leave, a figure stepped out from the farthest mirror. He looked like me, but he wasn't. He carried himself like a king, with perfect posture and a calm that demanded attention. Eyes full of light, voice smooth as silk. He smiled. "Do you see it now?" he asked. "What you worshipped wasn't yourself. It was the version of you the world clapped for, and you let that applause drown out your soul." His presence was overwhelming, not cruel, but undeniable. This was Lucifer, not as the monster of myth, but as the ideal I had been chasing all my life. "Why show me this?" I asked, trembling. "Because pride doesn't scream, 'I am evil.' It whispers, 'I am enough,' until you stop growing, until you stop listening." Then he faded, and I stayed alone again. I stayed in that hallway for what felt like days, maybe lifetimes. No voice told me to move on. I had to choose. And when I finally stood again, I wasn't lighter. I was emptier. But it was the kind of emptiness that makes room for truth. Behind me, the mirrors began to fade. Not break, just dissolve. They weren't needed anymore. I had looked, I had seen, and I had admitted. That was enough for now. Before I crossed into the next trial, I looked back once, not at the reflections, but at myself, who I had become after facing them. And I whispered, "I'm sorry." Not to the room, not to Lucifer, but to me, the me I had buried under layers of false brightness. If you're still alive, and you feel the urge to prove your worth through applause, through status, through constant validation, I beg you to pause. I beg you to look, not at your followers, not at your titles, not at your highlight reel. Look at the version of you that cries in silence, the one that doubts, the one that fails. Ask yourself, who are you when no one is watching? That's the version that matters. That's the soul you'll meet when the doors appear. I carried pride like a shield, but it turned into a mask. And by the time I removed it, I had forgotten the face underneath. Please, don't wait until the mirror is the only thing left that tells the truth. Look now, while you still have a reflection. I thought I had seen the worst of myself in that mirror of pride. But the second door opened not to show who I wanted to be, but what I wanted to own and how far I was willing to go to have it. Gate 2, the weight of gold, Mammon, greed. The second door was heavier than the first. It didn't open with ease. It groaned, reluctant, as if burdened by something it couldn't carry anymore. The moment I crossed the threshold, the air thickened. Not hot, not cold, just dense. Like I had stepped into a place where everything weighed more than it should. I stood in the middle of a vast, crumbling chamber. Its pillars reached up into a ceiling that I could never quite see. Every surface glittered with gold. Coins, crowns, chains, and trinkets stacked in endless, unstable towers. But none of it shimmered with joy. The gold was dim, sickly, like it had lost its luster centuries ago. I took one step forward and the floor shifted beneath me, not from instability, but from something deeper. A low hum began to rise. Not sound, not song. It was hunger, not mine, the room's. At first, I didn't understand what this trial would be. I had never thought of myself as greedy. I wasn't rich. I didn't hoard money or jewelry. I wasn't the kind to steal. But then I saw them, faces buried in the walls, eyes wide open, staring, not blinking, mouths agape, and each one was my own. Every face was a version of me wanting something, not just money, attention, recognition, power, praise, comfort, control. Every time I had measured my worth in what I owned or what I was owed. Every time I had said, I deserve this, even when others had less. The hunger had never been in my hands. It had always been in my heart. I walked deeper into the chamber and the gold beneath my feet turned sticky, like syrup. Every step required effort. I was sinking. In the distance, I saw a figure. Tall, cloaked in robes that shimmered like molten coins. He didn't move, he didn't speak, but the moment I saw him, something inside me stirred. He had no crown, but I knew he ruled this place. His presence wasn't violent, it was persuasive. You wanted more, didn't you? More time, more admiration, more safety, more security, more than what others had. I didn't need to hear the words. I had said them to myself too many times already. I remembered a friend who once asked for help, and I said I was busy, though I wasn't. I remembered skipping birthdays, moments, even goodbyes, because I was chasing something, a promotion, a number in a bank account, a feeling that never lasted. I remembered standing in line at a funeral, shaking hands, pretending to care, while thinking about my phone, my meetings, my schedule. It wasn't about gold. It never was. It was about wanting more than I gave, always reaching, never resting. The figure stepped closer. His face was smooth, untouched by time, but his eyes were hollowed out, as if scraped clean by centuries of longing. You've met me before, he said. I nodded. I didn't know your name. He smiled, not kindly. I am Mammon. I don't knock. I whisper. And indeed, his voice had lived inside my every justification. Every time I convinced myself that I earned happiness at someone else's expense. Every time I let someone else's need become invisible because mine felt louder. He held out his hand, not as a threat, but as a gift. In his palm sat a small black stone. It looked worthless, yet somehow familiar. This is the piece of you that never had enough. I hesitated, and then I took it. And when I did, the entire chamber cracked. Gold splintered, walls buckled, and towers of treasure collapsed like sandcastles. The weight I had carried, my need to own, to control, to always want, broke. I fell to my knees as the floor gave way beneath me, but I didn't scream, because in that moment I wasn't afraid of losing. I was afraid of seeing how much I had already lost. The room disintegrated into silence, and Mammon was gone. All that remained was the stone in my hand, now warm, now pulsing, now part of me. It would never fully vanish, but I could choose whether to feed it. As I stood again, the dust still settling around me, I thought of the people I'd passed by, the moments I'd missed, the relationships I'd let wither while I reached for more. And I wept, not because I was empty, but because I finally understood what it meant to be full. If you're listening to this, and there's a voice inside you that always wants something next, something bigger, something shinier, something others can't have, please, listen carefully. Wanting is not evil. Desire is not sin. But when you forget how to appreciate what already surrounds you, When you forget the hands that reach for yours while your eyes are fixed on something else, that's when the hunger wins. And Mammon smiles. Greed doesn't begin in the vault. It begins in the heart that never says thank you. So say it now. Say it while you still have something, someone, to be grateful for. Because if you don't, one day you'll find yourself sinking into gold that has lost its shine. And you'll realize too late that what you wanted most was already gone. Greed left me aching for more, but lust didn't ask. It pulled, it breathed. And the third door opened, not with thought, but with heartbeat. Too fast, too close, too familiar. Gate 3, the touch that burned. Asmodeus, lust. The third door breathed. It exhaled a warm current the moment I touched it. Fragrant, inviting, almost tender. It didn't feel like punishment. It felt like memory, like comfort. I stepped inside, and the world blurred. I stood in a place that wasn't quite real. The floor beneath my feet pulsed like skin. The air shimmered like heat rising from pavement. And all around me, curtains of silk moved without wind, brushing against my face, my arms, as if the room itself wanted to touch me. The color was red, but not just red, alive, living, breathing. And in the center stood a figure cloaked in desire. She, or perhaps he, shimmered between shapes, a silhouette drawn from everything I'd ever wanted. A face that felt familiar, a voice that didn't need to speak. I wasn't afraid. I was tempted, not by flesh, not even by fantasy, but by the promise of being wanted, of being needed, of being adored. The figure stepped closer. Every motion sent a ripple through the room, as if the space itself responded to the rhythm of longing. "You came here willingly," they said, voice wrapped in velvet. I wanted to protest, to explain that this was part of a trial, that I didn't choose lust. But the moment I opened my mouth, memories flooded in. Not of love, of craving, of using people as mirrors to reflect back my desirability. Of moments where I chased connection not for truth, but for validation, for control. I remembered the people I touched and forgot, the lies I whispered to get closer, the truths I ignored once I got what I wanted. I remembered the rush of being seen, followed by the emptiness of never being known, and I realized I never wanted them. I wanted to be wanted. The figure circled me slowly. They didn't leer. They didn't laugh. They looked at me with a strange kind of pity. "This isn't about lust," they said. "It's about absence, the hollow ache you tried to fill with skin." The room pulsed again. The curtains dissolved, and I was standing in a hall of hands, hundreds of them, reaching out, touching, grasping. They didn't hurt me, but they didn't let go. Every hand was familiar. I had asked for them. I had pulled them close, and then I had let them go. Not gently, carelessly. I fell to my knees as the hands covered me, not suffocating, just exposing. Because beneath every desire I chased was a wound I never addressed. I had mistaken hunger for intimacy. I had confused lust for connection. And every time I did, I left someone else colder. I wanted to scream, to pull away, to ask for forgiveness from people I couldn't even name anymore. But then I felt it. One hand colder than the rest. Still, steady. It pressed against my chest, and I looked up. The figure had changed. No longer fluid, no longer beautiful. Their face was now sharp, ancient, crowned with shadows. Their presence no longer warm, but heavy. They spoke only once more. "I am Asmodeus. You never heard my name because I wore your voice." Then they vanished, and so did the hands. I was left alone in a room of silence. The warmth was gone. The shimmer faded, and I was shaking, not from shame, but from grief. Grief for every time I mistook being desired for being loved. Grief for every person I used as a balm for my own emptiness. Grief for how easily I said it meant nothing, when to someone else, it did. I stayed there for a long time, arms wrapped around myself. No one to touch, no one to impress, no performance to offer, just me, and the wound I kept trying to seduce into silence. Eventually, a light appeared, soft, distant, not seductive, just real. I followed it, barefoot and raw, until the room melted away. And I knew I had passed the trial, not by resisting lust, but by finally understanding it. By admitting that desire had ruled me far more than I had ever ruled it. If you're hearing this, and there's someone you're reaching for only because you feel lonely, or empty, or unseen, please, pause. Ask yourself, do I want them, or do I just want to feel wanted? Desire is not evil, but when we let it speak louder than truth, when we chase it to numb ourselves instead of heal, we don't just hurt others, we hollow ourselves. You don't need to be touched to be whole. You don't need to be desired to be worthy. And if someone gives you their heart, don't take it like a prize. Hold it like a mirror. Because one day, you'll look into your own and see only the ashes of those you burned. Lust doesn't begin with the body. It begins with the fear that no one will ever love what's beneath it. Don't feed that fear. Face it, while you still have someone who sees you, and not just your shape. Desire fades quickly, but envy lingers. As I stepped through the fourth door, I didn't crave bodies. I craved lives, faces, stories that were never mine, and still I reached. Gate 4, the eyes that weren't mine, Leviathan, envy. The fourth door opened to water, not crashing waves or pouring rain, but stillness. An ocean so still it reflected the sky like a mirror. I stepped onto a surface that didn't ripple, didn't resist. My feet didn't sink, they floated. Everything was blue. Not the kind that soothes, but a kind that drowns quietly. I walked forward. There was no sound, no wind, no horizon, only reflections. Dozens of them, hundreds. My face again, my body, but distorted just slightly. A version of me that looked a little stronger, a little taller, a little more admired. And then I saw others, people I knew, people I remembered, the friend who always seemed effortlessly loved, the colleague who succeeded faster, the stranger whose smile caught more attention than mine. They stood on the water too, gliding, graceful, untouched by doubt. And suddenly, I wasn't walking anymore. I was watching how they moved with ease, how they laughed without effort, how the world seemed to love them without asking for permission. And in that moment, I felt small again, smaller than I ever admitted. A figure emerged from the water. It didn't step, it slithered. Its form wasn't fixed. It moved like a serpent cloaked in mist, its body weaving in and out of the reflections like silk. Its eyes found mine, and I froze. "You know me," it whispered. And I did. I had never spoken its name, but I had lived in its presence for years. Leviathan, the one who coils in your gut when someone else shines. The one who turns admiration into quiet resentment. The one who whispers, "It should have been you." I wanted to look away, but the ocean of reflections had closed in. I was surrounded by faces I envied, faces I had smiled at in life while clenching my fists behind my back. "You don't hate them," Leviathan said, circling. "You just wish you were them." And it was true. I had never wanted harm to come to those I envied. I simply wanted to replace them, to be the one who got the offer, the praise, the love, the light. Even worse, I had stopped appreciating what I had, because everything I had, I compared. My joy was measured against someone else's. My self-worth was a scoreboard I never admitted I was keeping. The serpent paused. "Tell me," it said, "when was the last time you celebrated someone without turning inward?" I searched my memories, and I found silence. Not because I was cruel, but because I had been quietly starving. For approval, for recognition, for proof that I mattered more than I feared I didn't. And that hunger twisted my vision. It turned other people's blessings into mirrors that reflected only my perceived lack. Even in love, I had compared. Even in friendship, I had wondered, why them and not me? Envy is a quiet rot. It doesn't scream, it sighs. It waits in silence, making every victory feel smaller, every joy feel borrowed, every kindness feel transactional. And Leviathan was always there, beneath every forced smile, every "I'm happy for you, I didn't fully mean," every backhanded compliment I dressed as honesty. The serpent slithered closer. "I have no form," it said, "because I wear the face of whoever you can't stop looking at." It pressed its scaled body around my legs, not tightly, just enough to remind me I had let it live there for too long. "I never wanted this," I whispered. "But you fed it," it replied, and I had. Every time I measured myself by someone else's standards, every time I thought, if I had what they had, I'd finally be enough. The serpent loosened, and the water beneath me began to ripple. Not violently, gently, like something had shifted. Leviathan retreated, vanishing beneath the waves with a final glance, not of hatred, but of sorrow. And then, the reflections around me shattered, not from impact, but from release. I stood alone now, just me. No comparisons, no faces, just my own bare self, finally unmeasured. The water was still again, but this time it reflected only truth. As I stepped back toward the door, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired, because envy isn't an emotion, it's an erosion. And I had been crumbling for years without knowing it. But even now, after the serpent has vanished, I can feel it deep in my ribs. A subtle twitch of comparison that hasn't fully left. Because envy doesn't disappear in a moment of insight. It waits. It returns in the glance you cast at someone else's success. In the silence that follows a friend's good news. In the small, cruel thought, what about me? It is a shadow that walks behind love, behind admiration, behind even kindness. And the worst part, it steals not only your peace, but your presence. How many conversations did I only half listen to because I was busy measuring my worth? How many smiles did I return while secretly wondering why theirs felt brighter? Envy didn't just poison my soul, it poisoned my joy. It turned blessings into burdens, turned connection into comparison, turned love into a battlefield where I competed against people who weren't even fighting me. It made me bitter toward friends who had done nothing wrong, and perhaps it made me unkind to people who only ever wanted to see me happy. Now, standing here in this ocean of stillness, I know something I wish I had learned earlier. That someone else's light doesn't dim mine. That joy multiplies when shared. That my life, though imperfect, though quieter, was never lacking. Only unloved by the one person who needed to love it most, me. So if you're listening to this, and envy has hollowed something inside you, please, don't wait to feel grateful. Practice it now, out loud, to their face, even if your voice shakes. Because every time you celebrate someone else with sincerity, you're not just freeing them, you're freeing yourself. I walked away from envy with ashes in my mouth, and the next door didn't call to me. It cracked, it bled heat, and I remembered some of my sharpest words were whispered, not screamed. Gate 5, the fire I fed, Satan, wrath. The fifth door pulsed with heat, not warmth, Heat, the kind that stings before you even touch it, the kind that makes the air shimmer and tremble. I didn't push the door open. It pulled me in. The world behind it was burning. Ash covered the sky. Smoke rose in waves. The ground was cracked and blackened, as if it had once bloomed and then been scorched without mercy. All around me, charred structures stood like skeletons, memories of something that used to hold meaning. It wasn't a battlefield. It was an aftermath. I walked carefully, but every step stirred embers. They leapt up and licked my ankles, reminded me of things I had forgotten, things I had buried in silence. I told myself I wasn't an angry person. I smiled, I laughed, I stayed calm, but now, in this ruined place, my smile was nowhere to be found. The wind shifted, and with it came voices, not screams, but echoes. Words I had said in the heat of a moment, sharp, precise, meant to wound. You're pathetic. Why should I care? I hope it hurts. I recognized every one of them, not because I remembered saying them, but because I remembered the way it felt when I let them loose. Like power, like release. Wrath doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through clenched teeth and polite cruelty. Sometimes it hides behind sarcasm. Sometimes it smiles while it burns. I stood before a ruined home. Its walls collapsed inward, its frame blackened beyond recognition. And still, I knew this place. It was my brother's face when I betrayed him in silence. It was my mother's eyes the day I said nothing as she cried. It was the friend I ghosted without explanation, the stranger I humiliated in traffic, the partner I punished with withdrawal instead of words. I had burned people down with my anger, not in a single explosion, but slowly, consistently, and always with justification. They deserved it, I used to say. They started it. I'm just being honest. But the truth was simpler. I liked the fire. I liked the way it made me feel powerful in a world that so often made me feel small. I didn't lash out to defend myself. I lashed out because I didn't know how to ask for help. I wandered further into the ruins, and eventually I saw him. Sitting at the center of the destruction, calm, poised. He wasn't a beast or a monster. He looked like a man, like someone who had been hurt once, long ago, and decided never to be hurt again. His eyes burned, not with fury, but with conviction. "You built this," he said softly. I knew he was right, and you kept feeding it. Every time you refused to forgive, every time you chose vengeance over vulnerability, every time you convinced yourself that silence was safer than softness. He stood, and the ground beneath us cracked with flame. "I am Satan," he said, "but not the one you feared. I don't tempt with sin. I fuel the fire you refuse to put out." And I saw then that he had always been near, not shouting, but waiting. Waiting for me to explode, waiting for me to retreat behind anger instead of stepping through pain. I fell to my knees as the heat surged around me. Flames circled, not to destroy, but to reveal. And in their light, I saw all the things I had destroyed in my lifetime. Trust, closeness, love, truth. Not with violence, but with heat I never learned to name. Tears came, and they sizzled as they touched the ground. "I'm sorry," I whispered. I didn't know how else to be heard. The flames dimmed, not gone, but waiting now, waiting for a different choice. When I stood again, Satan was gone. All that remained was a single glowing coal resting in the center of my palm. It didn't burn, it pulsed, not as a punishment, but as a reminder. That fire too can be tamed, but it must be named first. And that was the hardest part, admitting that my anger wasn't about others. It was about the parts of me I had refused to feel. Pain, rejection, abandonment. all buried under a blaze I thought I could control, and yet I never could. I thought I was strong because I never cried, because I never showed weakness, because I ended arguments before they could start, by raising my voice, by walking out, by burning the room down so no one else could speak. But now I know that wasn't strength. That was fear with a weapon. That was shame wearing armor. And the fires I fed didn't just harm others, they left me alone. If you're hearing this, and rage is your shield, if silence has become your sword, please. You're not strong because you feel nothing. You are not powerful because you cut others down. You're not safe just because you never let anyone in. Wrath will trick you into thinking it's protecting you, but really it's isolating you. I know the satisfaction of a well-placed insult. I know the control that comes from shutting down before someone else can leave. But I also know the emptiness that follows, the loneliness, the regret. So before you raise your voice, before you withdraw, before you burn another bridge, pause and ask, what am I really trying to say? Because somewhere beneath the fury is a truth you've been too afraid to speak. Let that truth out, gently, softly, while there's still time to be heard. Because if not, one day you'll find yourself standing in the ruins you created, and you won't remember what you were even fighting for. After rage comes silence. I expected pain, but instead I found comfort. Slow, heavy, familiar. The sixth door didn't tempt me with noise. It offered something worse. The right to give up. Gate 6, the sleep that never ended. Belphegor, Sloth. The sixth door didn't open. It sighed. A slow, hollow exhale that felt more like giving up than invitation. When I pushed, it barely resisted, like even the door was too tired to care. On the other side, there was no fire, no mirrors, no weight, just fog. A thick, soupy gray that clung to my skin like regret. I walked forward, but I couldn't tell how far. Time didn't move here. Sound didn't echo. Light barely bothered to show up. It was the quietest place I had ever known, and the most dangerous. I kept walking, or maybe I just thought I was. The ground felt soft, like a bed I never left, and around me were shapes, faded desks, half-finished paintings, abandoned books, broken clocks, all frozen in the middle of something that had once mattered. And then I saw it. A chair, ordinary, worn, facing nothing. I sat, and it felt good, safe, familiar. It welcomed me like I had earned the right to rest forever, and I almost forgot why I was here. That's how it begins. Sloth doesn't shout, it lulls, it whispers, "You've done enough." It strokes your hair and says, "Later, tomorrow, after this." And slowly, it convinces you that effort is suffering, that motion is pain, that dreams are too heavy to lift anymore. I had lived here longer than I wanted to admit. Every project I started and never finished. Every call I meant to return but didn't. Every gift I buried because using it meant risking failure. I didn't choose rest. I chose avoidance because it was easier to imagine myself as someone with potential than to become someone with proof. I told myself I was being kind to my mental health. I told myself I was just waiting for the right time, the right energy, the perfect spark. But really, I was afraid of how much I might fail or succeed. A voice stirred the fog. Low, heavy, not cruel, just bored. "You had so much time," it said, "and you traded it for nothing." I turned and there he was. Not terrifying, not grotesque, just unimpressed. He looked like someone who had seen the same mistakes made 1,000 times and stopped expecting better. He didn't move. He didn't need to. "I am Belphegor," he said. I rule the realm of abandoned dreams. And suddenly they were all around me, my dreams, hanging from the sky like wilted lanterns, scripts I never finished, apologies I never sent, passions I left to rot because chasing them would have meant discomfort, effort, exposure. I stood and tried to reach one, but my arms were heavy. You made comfort your God, he said, and worshipped at the altar of later. And I had. How many mornings had I opened my eyes, full of ideas, only to roll over and say, not today? How many opportunities had I let pass, not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much and feared too deeply? Laziness isn't the absence of action. It's the presence of fear, dressed in sleep. It wears the mask of self-care while quietly draining your potential. I looked back at the chair. It still waited for me. So inviting, so forgiving. But I knew what it meant now. To sit was to disappear. To stay was to die slowly. I thought about the people who once believed in me. The ones I kept saying, I'm working on it, to. They stopped asking. They stopped waiting. And eventually, they stopped believing. And can I blame them? Even I stopped believing in me. That was the cruelest part of all. Not what I lost, but who I stopped being. I remembered the invitations I declined, not because I didn't care, but because it felt easier to avoid life altogether. I remembered the partner I pushed away, telling them I just wasn't ready, when the truth was, I was too afraid of becoming someone they could actually love. I remembered how many chances the world gave me to rise, and how often I rolled over instead. I turned away. Belphegor smiled faintly. Few ever leave, and I believed him, because this gate was not guarded by pain, but by numbness. And the longer you stayed, the harder it was to feel anything at all. I walked until the fog began to thin. Each step a rebellion, each breath a decision. And when I reached the edge, I looked back one last time, not with hatred, but with grief, for all the versions of me that never made it out of that chair. If you're listening to this, and you've been saying, one day, for years, if your dreams are dusty, your spark dim, your bones heavy with stillness, please, don't mistake safety for living. Don't wait until the weight of regret becomes your blanket. Start, clumsily, slowly, quietly, but start. Show up for yourself, even when no one else is watching. Move even when it feels pointless. Write even if no one reads. Speak even if your voice trembles. Call them. Try again. Forgive yourself. Because purpose isn't a lightning strike. It's a candle you relight each morning. And you're not broken just because you stopped. You're not worthless because you're behind. You are still here. Which means it's not too late. But if you don't begin now, someday you'll sit in that chair too long. And you won't even remember what you were meant to become. I woke from stillness into sweetness. The seventh door was not a prison. It was a banquet. And I feasted, not to celebrate, but to forget what hunger really felt like. Gate 7, the feast that left me empty. Beelzebub, Gluttony. The seventh door did not burn. It dripped. A thick golden substance oozed from the cracks like honey left in the sun. It smelled of sweetness, of salt, of rot. I hesitated, not from fear, but from something stranger. Desire. When I opened the door, I found myself in a banquet hall that stretched into eternity. Tables upon tables were stacked high with food, drink, pleasure. Roasted meats, glazed fruits, wine shimmering like rubies. Cushions sprawled across the floor, velvet and satin soaked in candlelight. It was indulgent, sensual, beautiful. And I was alone, or so I thought. I walked forward, and the scent wrapped around me like arms. My mouth watered. My stomach growled, though I had not felt hunger in any of the other realms. This was different. A voice cooed behind me. "You've been starving for so long." I turned and saw no one, just a mirror. My own reflection, lips stained with wine, crumbs dusting my chest. I didn't remember eating, but I had, all of it, over and over again. I looked down, and my hands were slick with oil, shaking. Not from appetite, but from absence. Gluttony, I realized, was not about greed. It was about filling what could not be filled. Every bite I had taken, every indulgence, had not come from hunger. It had come from pain, from the ache of loneliness, from the boredom of days without meaning, from the silence I didn't want to sit with. There, in the mirror, I saw them all. Nights I binged not for flavor, but to forget. Purchases I made not out of joy, but because I didn't know how to feel anything else. Conversations I drowned in alcohol because the truth was too hard to say sober. The figure stepped from the mirror, now real, towering, decadent, cloaked in robes stitched from luxury itself, rings on every finger, a body too large for the room, yet somehow graceful. "I am Beelzebub," he said with a voice like melted sugar, "and I never made you want. I only gave you more." And he was right. He had never forced my hand. He simply whispered in the quiet moments, "Why not one more?" And I had listened, again and again. I ate to distract. I drank to forget. I consumed to avoid. But nothing ever satisfied. Because what I truly hungered for was never on the table. Not connection, not healing, not love. Only stimulation, only escape. And every time I reached for more, I dug the hole deeper. I collapsed to my knees, surrounded now by platters that had long since spoiled. Flies buzzed above decaying fruit. The wine had turned to vinegar. The air no longer sweet, but heavy and sour. And yet my hand still trembled, still reached. That was the worst of it. Even when I knew it would make me sick, I still craved. Even when I knew it wouldn't fill me, I still fed. Because somewhere along the way, I had mistaken excess for care. If I could have enough food, enough pleasure, enough distraction, maybe I wouldn't have to feel the emptiness growing inside me. Beelzebub crouched beside me, stroking my cheek with a jeweled finger. "You don't suffer from hunger," he said. "You suffer from forgetting what it feels like to be full." And with that, he vanished, leaving only silence, only the echo of my chewing long after the food was gone, only the realization that I had gorged myself on everything, except what I truly needed, and that was presence. The worst part wasn't the indulgence, it was what I lost because of it. I missed the late night call from a friend who needed me, because I was busy numbing. I forgot anniversaries, left texts unread, skipped moments of clarity, because I was always consuming something that promised to distract me from myself. I became unreliable. I became vacant, not outwardly, but slowly, in the ways that mattered most. And one day, people stopped reaching out, because I had nothing left to give, no space, no attention, no real presence. The hunger I tried to silence ended up eating my relationships, my clarity, my identity, and in the end, I wasn't full. I was just foggy. But here's what I wish I had known. Fullness has nothing to do with quantity. It has everything to do with meaning, with depth, with intention, with being awake enough to notice what's real. True nourishment isn't loud, it's quiet. It's holding someone's hand without checking your phone. It's cooking a meal and sitting with silence. It's being in a room and choosing not to escape it. If you're hearing this, and you find yourself always reaching, always consuming, always needing one more hit of comfort, one more scroll, one more sip, One more hour under the covers. Pause. Not in shame, but in honesty. Ask yourself, what am I really trying to feed? Because gluttony isn't about appetite. It's about escape. It's about the fear of sitting still long enough to feel. And it doesn't end when you're full. It ends when you're willing to be empty. Empty enough to receive. Empty enough to be still. Empty enough to finally face the wound. The feast that numbs you will never nourish you. You have to choose something harder, something quieter, something real, and you still can. You're not broken because you crave comfort. You're not beyond saving because you've lost control. But you must stop mistaking indulgence for healing. You must stop calling your distractions love. You are not starving, you are searching, and the table you need to sit at is within you. 7 gates behind me, each one a mirror, each one a scar. And now, before me, the first door that does not punish, it simply waits. Not to trap me, but to ask, do I dare walk free? They say death is the end, but they never told me about what comes after, about the gates, about the truth that strips you bare. I walked through 7 doors, and behind each, I didn't find demons. I found myself, my pride, my greed, my lust, my envy, my rage, my sloth, my hunger. Each one dressed like something I thought I needed. Each one whispered lies I wanted to believe, and I followed, willingly. Not because I was evil, but because I was empty. I searched for love and power, for comfort and gold, for safety and numbness, and I called it survival. But now I know, hell is not a punishment, it's a mirror. It doesn't show you what you've done, it shows you who you became when no one was watching. And still, even now, there's one final door, not behind me, but ahead. It does not burn, it does not drip, it opens. To forgiveness, to redemption, to whatever comes next, and it can open for you too. If you've seen yourself in these rooms I wandered, if you felt your own soul tremble in reflection, then hear this. You are not beyond grace. You are not too late. You are not what you've done, but you must choose to stop running, to stop numbing, to start remembering who you were before the hunger. That's where freedom lives. That's where the real journey begins. I walked through hell, and somehow I found the way back home.